Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, hosted by Organization Development and Change, Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State. This is a monthly webinar series presented during your lunch hour. My name is Yulin Chang. I just earned my PhD degree from the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State University. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, please use the chat feature in the Zoom platform. If you have any questions about the presentation, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. You can see the chat button at the bottom of the screen. The Q&A session will be at the end of the presentation. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change are designed for professionals who need the skills and knowledge to effectively lead change in their organization. Furthermore, there is a PhD program in workforce education and development with a concentration in human resource development and organization development. Our program has created a continuous monthly webinar series with experts around the world. Today, we are presenting Onboarding to Win, presented by Dr. Angela Rogers. Dr. Rogers earned her PhD in Workforce Education and Development in fall 2022. Her dissertation was on onboarding. She currently works at the Penn State Applied Research Lab in Leadership Development, Culture, and Student Progress. Previously, she was a training partner with the Penn State Center for Workplace Learning and Performance and the co-chair of the Penn State Commission for Women. She's a distinguished Toastmaster. She's a member of ATD and Pittsburgh chapter, currently serving as a VP Finance. She's a qualitative researcher and a certified en vivo expert. In addition to onboarding, her interests include talent development, career development, organization development, individual agency, mentoring, and DEIB. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker today. Dr. Rogers, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chang. I'm delighted to be here. Onboarding to Win. So what is this talk about? This talk is about how the research I did on onboarding can be used by you as an individual when you're starting your new job and onboarding yourself. As I did my research, I found that there are really two ways to look at it, two different perspectives to share the information. The first is, of course, from the employer perspective and what the organization can do better to make the onboarding experience work better for its new hires. But the other way to look at it is from the perspective of the new hire. And if you're a new hire, what you can do to make sure you're onboarding to win. So let's move on. So what are we going to talk about today? I'll just quickly share the outline and the objectives of my talk. And Ling, you can just hit the space bar. There we go. So we're going to talk about onboarding, what it is and why it matters, how to assess your needs as a new hire going through the onboarding process. I'm going to share with you a checklist that you can use to manage your onboarding process. There's an evaluation that goes along with the checklist, so you can check the checklist and make sure that you're getting what you need out of your onboarding experience and make adjustments as you go. Let's look Q&A and wrap up. More tips for success that will round out the information I'm sharing with you today. And what are my objectives for sharing this information with you? I want you to understand onboarding and your role as a newcomer in the process. I want you to prepare to be proactive. And I'm going to share with you tools that you can use to assess, plan, and evaluate your onboarding experience, so you onboard successfully and have a great start to your career or the next phase of your career, whatever that may be. Okay, we have a quick poll to see what we all think about onboarding as a way to get started with the conversation. I think can I launch the poll? I can. I'm going to launch the poll. Okay, so please pick the best answer to this poll for what is onboarding. Okay, it looks like everyone has participated. We're at 95%. I'm going to end the poll. Okay, and I'm going to share the results. So I'm glad to see so many people picked all of the above, and a couple people picked something else not listed above. So I'd love to hear from the people who picked something else not listed above, if you're willing to share what you were thinking about when you answered that poll. I guess they have to be allowed to come off mute so that they can speak. Can we do that?
We can have the discussion in our chat.
Oh, we can put it in the chat. Okay. So if you answered to the poll something else not listed above, are you willing to put a comment in the chat about why you made that decision? Because I would love to hear what you're thinking. Okay, yes, an opportunity for employees to set themselves up for success and engage early on. I totally agree with that. That should be included in the poll. And I'll also just open it up besides those who said something else not listed above. Does anybody else have a comment to make about this onboarding poll, why they picked the answer they did? I'm glad to see that so many people picked all of the above, because that means we're all thinking about onboarding in a very broad way and from the employee's perspective, an employee or newcomer centered approach to onboarding versus a narrow perspective, which is more of a compliance and organizational rule following. Oh, here we go. We have a chance to meet leadership, accept a mentor, learn about organizational culture, etc. Yes, very nice. Process of helping a new hire get integrated. Yes, yes. How long is onboarding? 6 months to a year. This makes for a large list. Yes. And all of the above. Easing the new employee into aspects of company and culture. Excellent. I think we are all on the same page, and I like this starting point for what we're thinking about onboarding. And I appreciate everybody participating in the conversation through the chat and the Q&A. So thank you very much. I'm going to close the poll and we're going to move on. So onboarding has two facets based on the research that I did. And Yuling, hit the space bar or the next or the arrow. All right. So first of all, an employer is bringing you in, providing training, introducing you to your new colleagues, culture, values, system, structure, and work. And the next thing, it is you entering and learning about and adapting to your new organization, figuring out how to perform your work and be successful. Plus, if you've moved, you might be figuring out how to live in a new place. And maybe it's an easy move. Maybe you just move from Pennsylvania to Virginia, or maybe it's a harder move. Maybe you've moved to Switzerland from Pennsylvania. So that cultural adjustment to the new living area is another aspect of onboarding that you need to pay attention to as a newcomer. And I also argue your hiring organization also should be prepared to help support you in making that adjustment. Okay, let's move on. Why should you invest some time in onboarding and taking charge of your onboarding? Well, there are several reasons. You can just space through and bring up all of these, Yuling. So effective onboarding is going to shape your performance and your opportunities with your current employer and future employers, and it's going to set you up for career success. Whereas poor or no onboarding, well, you're more likely to quit. It's going to have a negative impact on your self-efficacy. People who are poorly onboarded tend to have lower lifetime earnings. And there's also research that shows people who are poorly onboarded are going to experience later unemployment or underemployment. So those are some reasons why you should think that onboarding yourself is important. So let's look at the common problems you are likely to face in onboarding. Let's bring some of those problems up. You see, I've divided them into two categories. They're problems that have to do with what the employer is providing or doing or not doing, and then problems that have to do with what you can do or not do or what you can manage. So let's start on the employer side. This is from my research, the diary study that I conducted about this time last year. So from the employer's side, you're likely to encounter information overload as the employer is trying to get you onboarded as fast as they can, and they're giving you all the content they have, all of the information that they need you to learn. They're going to try and get it to you as efficiently and as fast as they can. So information overload. Unclear expectations are another common problem. Awkward interactions with your new coworkers. Some feelings of isolation, whether you're working on site or remotely, you can have that isolation feeling in both ways. Barriers, not being able to access what you need, either a communication barrier or a technological barrier. Resource delays, if you're sitting waiting to get your account set up, you're sitting waiting to get your computer, you're waiting to get your company car, you're waiting to get your purchasing card, all of those kinds of resources that you need to do your work can be delayed. Communication challenges, this can have to do with what people call things, how things are named. A job I started recently, I was supposed to go to a specific location for a training, and it said 336, and I thought it was the building I was in, and I was wrong because there was a little 2-letter code after the name of the room that meant it was in a different building, and I didn't even realize it. And then organizational volatility. This is change in the organization due to ongoing organizational change, improvement efforts, people leaving. In my study, there were experiences where people who had just been hired, they'd been assigned a mentor, they'd worked very closely with this mentor for a couple of weeks, and then the mentor left. And they were left feeling kind of high and dry. So that kind of volatility. I have a quote on the side here. I haven't had time to focus on HR materials, trainings, or give myself time to absorb the vast data. That refers to that information overload problem. Does anybody, let's see if we have some things in chat. Would training delays also fall under resource delays? I think it can, yes. If you need certain training in order to do something, that is a delay in the resource as well, I would say. So let's look at self. What are some problems that you have a little bit more direct control over as a new hire? The first one is anxiety, and it's common for people to have those feelings of anxiety. Think about how you can address the anxiety. If you anticipate that you might have some anxiety, you can make a plan for how you're going to address it and not be caught off guard. Work-life balance concerns. This can be just because of changing your schedule, a different commute, or it could be more so because maybe you're working remotely and you're working for a company that's in a different time zone than you are. And this has came up a couple of times in my study where people were not in the same time zone as their new employer. They're working remotely. They were trying to be online as early as they could and as late as they could to align their schedule with their supervisor or their other coworkers. And it made, instead of an 8-hour day, it made for a 10-hour day. And so figuring out how to balance accessibility across some different time zones with work-life balance was an issue for some people. External events can still happen in your life that will affect you at work. One of the people in my study was onboarding at her new job, and the second or third weekend, one of her close friends was in a very serious car accident, and that really threw her. It made it even harder for her to adjust to her new job responsibilities and to focus on all the learning she had. So you don't come to work in a bubble, right? You have life, you have things going on around you that may affect your work life. And boredom, maybe that seems surprising. We have both information overload, but also boredom. A few people said they felt like they didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. They were just hanging out and they didn't have anything to do and they were getting bored. And they wondered, what am I supposed to be doing right now? So that is something else that can come up as a problem. Having a strategy in place for what you're going to do if you feel bored could be helpful. And then here's the comment. This relates to the anxiety from my study. Seems like every other day, I just want to throw in the towel and walk away from this job. My emotions are not at all settled. So those are the problems. I hope I haven't totally bummed you out, because there are ways to deal with them. And let's move on. So my main message for you today as an individual starting a new job is to be proactive in managing your onboarding problems. And these are the strategies that the people in my study used to manage their onboarding problems. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the main way that you are going to learn about what is going on. Make allies. If people aren't coming to you and setting up opportunities for you to meet new people and get to know people, start doing that yourself. Be strategic about it. Figure out who you need to have as an ally and start building new relationships. If they're not asking you out for coffee, ask them out for coffee. Time management is another important proactive task that came up in my study. A lot of people were commenting in my diary study after 2 or 3 weeks. They said, man, I have to manage my time better to meet my needs. So you can start doing that right from the beginning. Don't just wait for people to bring things or to tell you what to do. Get out in front of it and manage your time as best as you can. Be confident. Having confidence will help you when things seem challenging. Prioritize your needs, and you have to be clear about what those are. And I have a tool that I'm going to share with you in a few minutes to help you do that. Have a positive attitude. That also helps when things are challenging or you're not, if you're confused or you're not getting what you need, have a positive attitude. That kind of goes along with being confident. Observe others. So another way to learn about how things work in your new organization and how to do things is to observe others. You don't necessarily need to ask direct questions, but you can observe, see how people are doing things. Be an intentional observer to watch, and maybe make a note to yourself about what you've observed, or make a note to ask a question later about what you've observed. The weekly log, which is the intervention tool that I used for my study, is helpful. Several people in my study reported that having the weekly logging help them to process and think about and reflect on their experiences and plan ahead for the next week. And just so you know, I didn't ask them if it was helpful. They said it was helpful without me asking them. Shadow a coworker for a day. That's another great technique to be proactive and to observe. Great. Thank you, Michael, for saying that. Previous experience also is helpful when you're onboarding. So what if you don't have previous experience? I think what that indicates, and my study also shows that people who are new in their career, who are taking their first job, they don't have that previous experience to lean on. So they need some extra help from people around them. They're more likely to be proactive because they're not really sure that they're supposed to. So that's just something for you to think about. Taking notes, that kind of goes along with keeping the log or keeping a notebook, and then helping others who come in when you come in, helping others voluntarily, helping others as a way to learn about what they're doing, and then helping the next group of newcomers that comes in. All of those things are helpful to you. Any questions about these proactive activities? Oh yeah, here's some comments from my study about setting up meetings to create those allies. And I have another, yes, so this is a very interesting comment. I don't like to play the new guy card, but I've had to in order to get things explained to me outside of the organizational jargon. So this is an interesting comment because it speaks to the importance of asking questions, but also alludes to the fact that some newcomers and you might feel a little weird about doing that. So I give you permission to play the new guy card as long as you need to. All right, let's turn to the first tool that we have for you today. And Yuling is going to put a copy of this document into the chat so that you can use it. We're not going to have a lot of time to go over the document, but I can at least share it with you. You can have a look at it. You can ask questions and we can talk about how you can use this when you're starting your new job. I'll give folks a few minutes to download and open this document. And then Yuling, we can move on to the next slide. So this onboarding needs self-assessment is a way for you to determine what your needs are so that you can make sure those needs are being addressed during your onboarding. So I'd like you to take about 5 minutes to think about a new job you plan to start soon and look at the needs assessment and just try to maybe work on 1 or 2 of the items. Then we'll all come back together and we'll discuss and debrief. All right, I think that's been 5 minutes. Let's regroup. First of all, does anybody have any questions about this self-assessment that you've been looking over? You can pop those questions in the chat. While you might be thinking about your questions or typing them, I know it takes a few minutes to type a question in the chat. Let's just talk a little bit about this onboarding needs assessment. So the very first question, who am I caring for or supporting? And the answer options, just me, I'm single, I have a partner, I have children, I'm caring for older parents, and then there could be something else that I didn't think of. So based on that, you might need to plan. If you're single and you don't have kids or anybody you're caring about, you can come and yes, very personal. Because you need to think about what kind of living situation you're going to need when you start your new job. And do you need to move at a time that allows for enrolling people in school? Do you need to have a partner who has another job who might also need to find some employment in a new place where you're working? And you might also want to consider what are the policies of the new employer related to time off, sick time for you, or family sick time, or parental leave time. So those are the kinds of things that you are going to want to make sure you're asking about. If there's relocation assistance, how can that apply to you and your needs? Do you need an extra room in a house where you can have an older parent, or is there some kind of adult day place where an older parent can be, or other things that they can do? So it's just to kind of get you thinking about if you're moving with a family, they need to adjust to the new location as well. And how can you tap into whatever resources there might be? So yeah, it is a very personal question. And then how familiar are you with the organization? This is just to get a sense of how much change are you undergoing right now? Is it a similar job, very different job? Are you brand new? This might help you think about how much learning do you need to do, because onboarding is learning, and that's what you're going to be doing. Where are you on your career path? So as I alluded to before, people with less career experience have less onboarding experience, and so might not have had previous experience that will help them with this next onboarding experience. Whether it's your first real job, a promotion, a career change, or you're coming into a manager role, maybe at the same organization, there are calls for a re-onboarding with a job change, even if some of the other things might stay the same. So this is, again, for you to think about what are some of the things you need to be learning, relearning, or unlearning, and what's going to help you be successful. You have to think about this because your employer might not be thinking about this. How much change, stress am I experiencing? This question is really directly related to the research that I did, and I asked people to mention what were some of the biggest changes they were going through at this time with starting a new job. So moving to a new location, especially if it's international, very different with language. Working remotely for the first time was a big challenge for people in my study. If you're a diverse new hire and you're entering a predominantly white organization, can you tap into the employee resource groups? Are there other resources for you to tap into to help with your adjustment? Or if this is just normal for you and you don't feel any stress at all, that's great. But most people are going to feel some kind of stress with taking on a new job. Thinking about the systems and procedures and training you need. Now, this is getting into what your employer might have given some thought to, but it's good for you to think about it also. And just to quickly finish up, how do you prefer to learn? If you have some choices, it's good to give some thought to what's the best way for you to learn, because onboarding is learning. So think about if you want to go to a training program, if you'd like to read, if you want to coach, if you want to use videos, or if you want to just jump in and do hands-on sort of on-the-job training. And how do you seek information? Do you want to have a go-to person? Do you want to look it up? Do you like both? Both is really a good way to go. And then another place on this form for you to ask to write down other things that you might be concerned about. The reason we do this onboarding self-assessment is so that when we come to look at the onboarding checklist, which is what we'll do next, you have done some pre-thinking, some homework, if you will, so that you can determine what you need and what specifically is going to meet your needs. Comments or questions on the self-assessment? Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I hope it's useful to you as you move to your next career opportunity. Let's go ahead now to the next tool that we have today. So the checklist, and Yuling is going to put that document in the chat. So a lot of people in my study mentioned having a checklist or a plan as something that was very helpful to them. And this isn't a plan completely because it doesn't have all of the details or a time frame, but it has a checklist. And actually, I think we're probably not going to work on this individually for 7 to 10 minutes due to time, but we'll go through it. And I'd like to hear any questions you have. I'd like to see any questions that you have in the chat. So let's just take a look at the first item on here. This is pretty obvious, right? Payroll and benefits. Do you need this? Yes, you need this. What is the priority? That's probably number one priority. And is your workplace offering this to you? Yes, they should be. And who is providing it? And you can see the example way that you can fill this out is you can say, yes, my HR rep had a new hire meeting on May 10th. And so that's been taken care of. Conditions of employment, another basic thing. Do you need this? Yes, it is high priority. And we had our HR rep go over that on the date you started. Then as we get down the list, there might be some things that your employer hasn't necessarily thought of. And I have to say, I have a little bit of an ulterior motive in giving you this checklist in your role as the newcomer, the new hire. You can share it with your future employer and they can adopt it. So professional introduction, that's something that I find a lot of organizations fail to take care of. And if they haven't done it, you can do it. Write up an email introducing yourself and send it to them with your photo so they can share it through the company email and intranet before you get there, so that there's an introduction of the new person. Jargons, terms, and acronyms. This is also a big thing that new hires often have concerns about. And I work someplace where we use tons and tons of acronyms, and every workplace has specialized language. So some people have put together a tool with all of those. And if you can get a copy of the jargons and acronyms and specialized language and how things are defined, then you'll know what people are talking about, especially during some of those early meetings where you're sitting there, jargons and acronyms are flying around the room like crazy monkeys, and you're wondering, what does that mean? And you might not have the chance to ask in the moment. So that's another common need that new hires have. Getting a tour of your new workplace or town. is also important so that you know where you are. What's the transportation situation like? Am I going to drive and park? Am I going to take a train? How am I going to get to work and get around? Safety and emergency procedures and resources. In my new workplace, when I started, I got a checklist that included making sure I knew where the muster area was in case of a building evacuation due to a fire drill or actual fire. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about here with safety and emergency procedures and resources. Where's the AED? And if you know CPR and are trained, you definitely want to know where that is so that if there's an emergency, you can be ready to help. Then, of course, the job responsibilities and expectations. Who's your go-to person? Now, this is a person that you need to identify early on where you can go with whatever weird questions you have that will be happy to answer them for you. It might not be who you think it is, but audition a few people and see who seems the best source for the kinds of questions you might need to ask. Finding out from your coworkers and your supervisor who does what. How do you access the knowledge base? Do you have the equipment, supplies, and workspace you need? And on and on. There's so many things that a new hire needs, and in places that don't hire frequently. If it's been a while since the last time they brought someone on, they might not even remember all of the things that need to be done for a new hire. So this checklist, it kind of starts with what's most immediate and obvious and goes down through what's more medium term, more long term, and less obvious. And then, of course, there's spaces on there for you to write in what you think should be on the checklist too. I'm love to hear some feedback from you about this checklist, or if you have any suggestions for things that are missing on the checklist. We have about 5 minutes left. Am I right, Yuling, before we go into the Q&A part? Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, great.
We have
Mauricia, goals, performance managed, set up for success. Yes, I like that. Oh, the don't go there. Yes, so don't go there is a way to indicate maybe of questions or comments that are likely to not be welcomed. And you have to have a real trusted person who can tell you about that. And maybe they're questions that you want to just note down and you can't really address them right away, but maybe down the road, there's an opportunity to do that. So those are things that are sort of like forbidden discussion points. And you're not going to know what those are because they're kind of culturally determined, but you don't want to ask something of somebody that really makes it an awkward situation and paints you as a troublemaker, let's say. I know that's not a super great explanation. But every organization has those sensitive areas that they don't really want you to ask about. And you might have to, even if you have questions, you might have to put them on hold. So hopefully there's someone you trust enough that you can get the down low on that. A good example I've just thought of is like why someone might have just been fired. Okay, let's move on then to the last tool I have for you today. And that is the evaluation. And Yuling is going to put a copy of that in the chat for you to download. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this tool because it's really a replica of the checklist with the same items on the left, but the columns are a little bit different. It just has when it's completed, how well did it meet your needs, if it wasn't a complete satisfactory rating, what was missing, and then how can you get what you need? And you know what you need because you did the needs assessment, right? And there's an example on the slide here that just shows health and wellness resources. It looks like they had a web page that was reviewed. It was partially satisfactory, but what would you really like with regard to health and wellness resources at your new employer? And then how can I get what I need? That allows you to start making a plan to ask for what you need. Okay, let's go to the next slide so we can wrap things up on time. Just show all of those tips right now, Yuling. You don't have to pause. So as a newcomer, give yourself time to learn and adjust. Onboarding is learning. You need time to absorb and reflect and make use of the information. A lot of newcomers described drinking from the fire hose as a big problem for them. You're not going to learn everything if it's just a big dump. So give yourself time. If you're not getting the time, ask for the time. Take action before your first day. That's the corollary to, we tell employers, use the time between offer accept and first day to take care of things if you can. And so I'm telling you the same thing. Take action before your first day if you can. Ask them if there's any paperwork you can take care of. Ask them if you can draft a introductory email about yourself. What can you do ahead of time to make the first day smoother? Introductions. If people aren't giving you introductions, ask for them and do introductions yourself. Introduce yourself. Find a key informant or a buddy. This is another very important tactic. People in my study mentioned it, and many research studies have shown that having that key informant or buddy that you can ask questions of is very helpful. Ask questions, keep asking questions and asking for what you need. Cultivate a positive attitude. And as I mentioned, keeping a notebook or a log on a weekly basis so that you can reflect on what's happening and what you would like to have happen next will help you. And help the next newcomer. That's right. Thank you. I hope that these tools are useful to you. I did a version of this webinar for the Alumni Association earlier this spring. And as I was planning it with the coordinator, the thing we both shared was, we wish someone had told us this earlier in our careers. Yes, Jason, I love that you've said that. Leverage the checklist during the interview to ascertain if they're going to do a good job onboarding you. And we tell employers, you're having a good onboarding process can help your employer brand, and you can leverage it in recruiting. Thank you. I'm just going to review 3 key things that I hope you'll remember from the webinar today. The first is that onboarding is learning. It is a learning experience. You need to be proactive. And one of the best things you can do is to ask questions and keep asking questions. Thanks, Michael. I thought that might have been you. I recognized your name, so I'm glad to reconnect. Yeah, you don't want to have a scarring type of onboarding experience. Learn from the experiences of the people who were in my study to be proactive early in the process, instead of waiting a couple weeks to be disappointed and confused and then deciding to be proactive, which is what happened to some of them. And the research shows that people decide pretty early whether or not they're going to stay with their new employer. And a bad onboarding experience helps people decide to quit, right? Oh yeah, educating managers. Well, I've been doing a couple of webinars aimed at colleagues in the Association for Talent Development about the role of talent development and managers, and sharing the same information, but from that management perspective. Managers definitely need to be trained in what their role is with onboarding newcomers, because it's not like HR runs the orientation training and then sends you off and you're all done onboarding. The bulk of the onboarding happens with your work team and with your manager. And so they need to know what their role is.
Hi, Angela and everyone. Thank you for your presentation, and also thank you for sharing your takeaways. And we naturally progress to our Q&A session, I feel. There are questions popping
think
up
we
in our
did.
chat box, right? So yeah, feel free to ask Angela questions. If you have any, you can just put in the chat box. And here I have a one Q&A question from a participant.
Oh, questions about remote workers. That's a great
Right.
point, Jody. I don't have anything that specifically addresses remote workers on the checklist, but I would say that would be a great area to add questions such as, what are all of the time zones that my team members are in? And do we have sort of core working hours that everybody should be expected to be available? And am I being evaluated by how much time I'm logged in or by how much work I get done? So more of an outcomes-based approach. So those would be a couple of things to add to the checklist to ask about if you're a remote worker. Yeah, it's difficult to determine the go-to person when one is remote. That you'll have to ask your supervisor, who's my go-to person when I have all kinds of strange questions. hopefully, I mean, what they should be doing is they should be assigning you an onboarding buddy or coach, and that would be your go-to person. But they might not be doing that. And so then you have to ask for one.
Great. I think this also partially answered the question that I received here. So we have a question from a participant who is asking that what's the takeaway or what the HR people they can use implication from your research?
Yeah, I think the takeaway for the HR folks is that it's not just HR's job to do the onboarding. They have a big part of it in planning to make sure that people get all of those administrative things taken care of. If there's security, if there's compliance, if there's IT things, making sure that everything that has to do with compensation and conditions of employment are covered. But then they need to hand it off. They hand it off to the supervisor and the work team and hopefully the buddy, so that you're not just left on your own after you leave your HR orientation. And if HR includes talent development and learning and development within its purview, and not all organizations do that, then they need to think about, do they need to do some training so that the colleagues of the new hire know what their role is?
I have another question here. So this question is about how to think about nowadays many companies, they move their onboarding training to online, and how can they integrate the tools that you provided?
Right. So these tools, these could be created as online tools through any sort of project management software like Trello or Asana. So if these tools could be shared through some kind of online learning management system. And I think moving a lot of things online is great because it allows the new person to access tools, resources, and information when they want to, as many times as they want to, and at their own pace. And I think all those things are good, but it does not replace interpersonal interaction with people. And that is also very important for the new hire. So you can't replace everything with a online training video or online training course. A person has to be involved also.
Great. I think due to the sake of time, we can only open to a last question if anyone has a burning question now to ask. Otherwise, I will do the closing for our webinar today.
Oh,
Hi,
great. Jody, the College of Medicine Foundations for Success to supplement. Oh, yeah, I'm going to click on that. I definitely want to check that out.
Lisa, I have a question here.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
How to apply while large groups of workers together. Yeah, I think that it's good to welcome groups of workers together. The cohort approach is very good because it helps people form connections that will help them as they grow in their careers, hopefully helping them stay in the organization. So you have to take a layered approach. So there are some things at a very high level that everybody needs to be exposed to. Then they sort of divide into their work areas and learn some things that are more specialized based on that particular work area. And it kind of goes down in layers. So it needs to be modularized and layered for the large groups because you'll have some things that are in common and then other things that will be different based on the work area and the work team. Yeah, 50 to 80 is a big group.
Great. I would like to thank you, Dr. Rogers, and also everyone's participation. on behalf of Organization Development and Workforce Education Program, we hope you think this webinar is helpful. If we did not get to your question, please send us an email or reach out to the presenters directly via email. For the future webinar, we would like to hear your feedback on today's webinar. So please take the survey using the link in the chat. Our next webinar is about a general theory of human resource development, ideology, and method and implications on September 29th from 12 to 1 p.m. Registration for all events are free and can be found on our website. You can also find us on our social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today.